Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. And thank you so much for joining us today on our webinar, Single Keys, Finding Great Tenants, How to Read a Credit Report and Screen Like a Pro. My name is Karen Wong. I'm Single Keys Content Marketing Manager. We've got a great 30-minute session planned for you today. On the agenda, we'll be telling you a bit about Single Key, as well as our products and services. From there, we'll dive into our tenant report and share some of our best tenant screening tips. Finally, we'll end with the question and answer portion of the webinar. We'll first answer questions that were submitted ahead of the session, and then we'll answer your questions live. To make sure we see your question, please enter your question in the chat throughout the webinar. Once we've added your question to the queue, we'll mark it with a waving hand emoji. And then once your question has been answered, it'll be marked with a thumbs up emoji. Now with that, it's my great pleasure to introduce you to our panel today. We've got Hannah Jones, Business Development Representative. Hi, Hannah.
Hey, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today.
And we're also joined by Mackenzie Wilson, who is our Director of Customer Engagement. Hi, Mackenzie.
Hi, everyone. Hey, Karen.
Hey. Thank you both for joining us. Mackenzie, I'll turn it over to you to tell us a bit more about Single Key.
Yeah, for sure. So for the folks that don't know me, I'm Mackenzie Wilson. I'm one of the directors here at Single Key, as well as I run this Facebook group out in Alberta called the Alberta Landlord Community, which I think some people might recognize me from there. But anything and everything to do with landlords is kind of my forte, and really fits well with what Single Key does. Our whole mission is to take the risk out of renting and risk mitigation. And a lot of that risk is done upfront of the process, simply where you're making that decision to select your next tenant. The challenge from our side, being on the homeowner side, is in a very short period of time, you need to pick someone and find a way to trust them and give them complete control of an asset that's probably one of the most expensive things you own, a piece of property. So we really fit well into that mold of a little bit nervous here. I got the jiggles, but I'm excited. We really fit well into the mode of providing you as much information up front to make the most informed decision as possible to pick the best tenant for your next vacancy.
Great. Thank you so much. And Hannah, let me turn it over to you to talk more about Single Key's products and services.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Karen. So like Max said, our goal here at Single Key is to help mitigate risk for landlords such as yourselves. And we do that with our three main products here. So first of all, our tenant report is going to help you with screening potential renters for your property. Like Max said, your property is one of your biggest investments, and you want to make sure you're placing a great tenant. So with that report, we'll include a full Equifax credit check. So you're going to be able to see if there's any red flags there. Our background check will pull things like public criminal history, if there's any judgments against that tenant. And we'll also do a social media scan to include any public social media profiles that the tenant might have. In addition to our tenant report, we also offer automated rent collection, which will help incentivize on-time rent payments from your tenant. It's a set it and forget it service, so you can set it up at the beginning of your lease. Every month we'll pull the rent from the tenant's account and deposit it to your account within about 3 to 5 business days. And then finally, we have our rent guarantee program, which helps cover you if anything ever does go wrong with your tenant, even after you've taken all of those precautionary steps. With the rent guarantee, we will help you with evicting that tenant if they ever do default. We'll cover you for eviction fees to help you do that. And we'll also cover you for the rent for however long it takes to evict that tenant for up to 12 months, so that you're not having to be worried about paying the mortgage and other property expenses out of pocket for that time frame.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Hannah. Let's dive into our tenant report now. Mackenzie, I'll turn it over to you to share some highlights and key points.
Yeah, for sure. I'm just going to make sure we kind of queued it up. So I want to be efficient with our time. I'm going to go through our current Single Key report, as well as I'll give you guys a sneak peek of the brand new one that we have and kind of some differences in how we've added more data points for you guys to make that decision on that kind of we referred to at the beginning of the show. Ask your questions at any time in the chat. If it's relevant to the conversation, we might weave the question in, or if it makes more sense, we'll leave it to the end and then we're going to do an open Q&A. And if there's more questions come in, we will stay on longer to answer everyone's question as well. So ask your question away, and you'll see an emoji. Karen, what do we use for an emoji when people have had where we've captured their question for the queue.
It'll be a waving hand emoji when we've captured it in the queue, and a thumbs up when it's been answered.
Perfect. Okay, so why I'm so excited about this conversation is, if you even go back, say 10 or 15 years ago, the ability for a private homeowner to have enough information out there to make an informed decision was quite limited. You look now towards today, and I even say going into the future, we're just in a position of there's more and more data being available out there to really get to understand the quality of a tenant, their financial habits, and there's also strategies around how you build that relationship with that tenant and ensure that they're a good fit for you before you make that choice to select them for your next vacancy. So we'll cover on the data side. That part's actually a lot more simpler than I think it usually is thought of, where we basically give you all the same information that a bank would have before they finance a mortgage. But of course, you're doing that to select your tenant for the next vacancy. So this is our current report, and this is actually going to go away. And I say in the next couple of weeks here into early November, we're launching a new one. We're feverishly building a brand new backend right now, which is really exciting because we've added even more information to it. So we'll quickly go through it. So the way this is laid out, we've got some quick metrics across the top. Something that's going away, our single key score. We've decided to move away from it because our position for everyone on this call, for any homeowner making that decision to select a tenant, is we're providing you as much data as possible. We don't want to, I guess what's the right word for it? We don't want to skew or change your opinion whether you want to select a tenant or not select a tenant. We just want to give you that information up front. And we felt by having a single key credit score that we might be kind of shifting some opinions. So we've gone away from that. We still do the Equifax credit score. A rent to income ratio is super important. So what this is essentially how much money they make versus the rent that they can pay. Generally, the rule of thumb, I would say, of up to 5 years ago, that was at around that 30 to 35% range. Affordability, as you guys have probably all known, with increased rent really across the country and over major cities, and increased cost of living with inflation, that number's been pushed higher. More commonly, what we're seeing now from our data point is when couples are applying, they're pushing it up to 45% of that rent to income ratio. And Hannah, you could probably weigh in on this as well, because I know from when you do your part with the screening and helping qualify tenants for the rent guarantee, you look at a very similar figure. So how do you approach it?
Yeah, exactly. And usually what we're looking at in terms of our rent guarantee is that the rent to income ratio is below 45%. And we typically are going to base that on the person's gross income too, right? And Mac, to your point, because rents are going up all throughout the country, we're seeing tenants that are closer to that 45%. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's a bad thing because, like you said, most people were kind of used to being closer to that 30, 35%. It's just a matter of adjusting to with the new rent rates that we're seeing.
Yeah, totally. Okay, so let's get into the nitty gritty of the report here. We also have a debt summary as well. So this is a summary of all the outstanding payment requirements that this individual has. So this would be the minimum payments on credit cards, if they have any loans, those amounts as well. So you understand really at the end of the month, if you're looking at how much income they bring in, how much money should they actually have side to make payments and afford the rent. So the first part of our report is actually the digital application that we provide you guys. If you haven't used our service before, quickly, the way it works is you're at your property, you've done a viewing, someone goes, great, I'm really excited, I want to rent your property. What is the next step? At that point, you're going to send them a link to a single key application. They will go and fill it out online. And you can also link your application to a specific property, meaning that you can tie in the rental amount and as well as the address and as the starting date for the tenancy or the term. Now, why that's important? Because those numbers, especially the rent that you're going to charge for your property, will drive our metrics. So you want to ensure they're accurate so you can get an accurate metric as well to help you make that decision. All this information here is on the application side. So of course we have a bit of a profile, first name, last name, a SIN number, and driver's license. So a frequent question is, can I ask for a SIN number? You can ask for a SIN number, but the legal requirement across Canada, it has to be an optional field. We can't force or make anyone provide that information. What I usually suggest is if someone's got a unique enough name and a birth date, there's a good chance we'll be able to pull and do a hit off of their Equifax or TransUnion credit score. However, if it's more of a common name, I would suggest to the tenant as you're having that conversation that just for their ability to get their application shortlisted and have it being accurate, they either provide one of these two fields, the SIN number or the driver's license. Next, we'll cover the employment information, which is pretty straightforward. A quick tip as well here. I know a lot of the experienced landlords will probably already know this, but when you guys are going through and doing your background and credit checks, this information that gets provided here, ideally what you can do is in an ideal situation is you Google the company, you go through the main reception, the phone line, however they've got set up, and then you get directed to the supervisor or the direct manager of your tenant in question. And what that does for you is now you've gone through a trusted source and you know for sure you're talking to an employee at the company of the tenant. And then you're able to then just be very frank in your conversation and to the point of saying, hey, I'm doing my employee check for a potential tenant on a vacancy. They said they make this much money, whatever, can you confirm? And you'll find you'll have a lot more success that way. If you can't find the information online, you're forced to call the information provided. Just please know in the back of your mind, take it with a grain of salt. If there is a tenant that is being malicious and they've given a fake reference to a friend or a family member to pose as their employer, that's something just to be aware of. So we want to make sure you're, again, finding those information and points of truth. So next part is our current and previous rental history. Pretty straightforward stuff again, as well. Current residence, length of stay, reason for moving is always good to know. And going back to your pre-screen too, and this is something we talk about a lot, is you want in your pre-screen questions, one of the questions you should be asking is, have you given proper notice to your current landlord that you're moving? And typically how tenants treat their current landlords is probably an indicator how they're going to treat their next landlord. So if you've got someone that's been following the legislation, they've done it within the proper requirements, or they've done it, or they've gone beyond that and they've provided, say, the current landlord 2 or 3 months, they're working together because, of course, the logistics of moving does take time and it can be done on short notice. Is a good indicator of how they're going to treat you as the next homeowner or landlord. Okay, so kind of go through all this stuff. Now we do a bit of a kind of a quick questionnaire. It's nice to have as well. Something pretty excited, and we're going to touch on our new report. Is we've expanded on this. We now have a pet profile and a renting household profile. And what I mean by that, in the pet profile, we give you the name of the pet, some size, the type of breed. We get a lot more detailed because I think it's important as the homeowner, you have to be comfortable going to the rental property. So you need to have a very good idea if the potential tenant does own pets that you're comfortable interfacing with that tenant and showing up the property. It will make for a very stressful time managing rental properties if you're nervous or afraid to go into your properties. I'm talking a lot here. Hannah, is there anything I've missed that you want to kind of touch a point on as well?
No, I think you're good so far. It's yeah, definitely important information to have because you want to gather all of that before you move forward with someone, right?
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so and this is more of a summary section page. So again, this is just a sample report, so it does have some fictitious information in, but it is a really good kind of indicator to show you what type of information we provide to you guys. So in this case, we have the identity returned. We'll show that down below, but that means that this person's actually uploaded a photo of a government issued ID, which is great. Basically, a lot of these background checks too. So we have a plugin through a third party that we use that does an online record search, and which is great. So if you get a hit there, definitely dig into it. That's bonus. That's do your due diligence on that. If there's no hits coming back in our background check and it says everything's clear, just because there's so much information out there, not everything's available online. So a point in case here in Alberta, our tribunal is called RTDRS, Residential Dispute Resolution, RT, Residential Tenancy Dispute Resolution Service. There's the acronym. But their database actually isn't available online, which is quite unfortunate because it's one of the most applicable things you want to be doing a check on. If this current tenant has had a previous order done against them, or they've gone through a hearing where they had rent arrears or damages, We don't have access to that database because the government hasn't made it available online. So it's not captured in this online search. So the way I always want to tell new landlords when they're first looking at this information, if it comes back with a hit, that's bonus, great, do your due diligence on it. Just be cognizant and aware of it. It may not encompass all the different databases out there. And it's not exactly an indicator if something comes back completely clean, that there could still be something out there. So we'll get into the credit check information. And a good thing to touch on as well with the credit score. Credit score is a really good snapshot in time, meaning that in that very moment, it kind of tells you where they're at, but it may not be very indicative of the financial habits of an individual. So if you're solely basing or putting a lot of value on the credit score, there's a very good chance you could be missing tenants with a bit of a damaged credit score because of life events, and you're missing on a good opportunity to have a really long-term quality tenant. And what I mean by that is if a tenant's gone through say, job loss, divorce, some of these changes that were because of a circumstance outside of their control, it's directly impacted their ability to pay bills. And they've taken a bit of a hit, at least recently on their credit score with some late payments. We want to dive in past just the credit score and see how they've actually stewarded the financial credit score, the different products, and that would be a much better indicator of whether someone is financially responsible or someone that's a red flag you might want to move on from. Okay, so I'm moving pretty fast. Again, the public record search. Again, we will do a quick search online along a lot of the major social platforms to see if they've got a profile match in their name. Is always important for yourself to do your own due diligence and dig through each of the profiles and make sure that it is the right match to the person that is being on the application, and ensure that you go through and view it yourself. Our job, again, is to provide you all the information so you can make that informed decision yourself. We don't take away from doing your own due diligence. It's very important. Now, a pro tip here is we've got residential history. So yes, so yeah, we're in the credit score now. So these right here are reported addresses from Equifax. What that means is this is an address that this person has used to open up, say, a cell phone bill, a utility bill, credit card, whatever it might be. It's not always perfect because we are using Equifax's database, but if you do get a match, so if you see one of these previous addresses here, and we go back up to the rental application, and you see a match on the current or one of the previous addresses from Equifax, then all of a sudden you're in a position that you have a high degree of confidence that that information is true, which is critical. Our job really as landlords, when you're going through this process of screening and doing your due diligence, is collecting as much information as possible and then finding ways or methods to verify information is in fact true and trustful. So a great pro tip there, if you can get a match off of a previous billing address, chances are you've got legitimate information, which is great. A big red flag for me is if I see a tenant, and I know we're coming up in half an hour here, we got 10 minutes left, is if the tenant is lied or there's any misinformation, that's a huge red flag for me. I don't need to see a perfect credit score, as we mentioned before. There's other ways to validate the ability to pay bills on time. But if someone's intentionally being deceiving upfront or misinformation, it's not a very good way to start a tenancy, and it foreshadows a lot more challenges down the road. It's someone that I just call a red flag and I move on from. Hannah, anything else as you're kind of going through this?
Yeah, I think to your point, there's a lot more that goes into a credit score than just the number. And that's something that we look at a lot when we qualify tenants for the rent guarantee. It's not that we necessarily have a cutoff, they have to meet a particular credit score. We're more concerned as to the payment history there too, right? Whether things are going to collections or the tenant's making an effort to catch up, to pay on time, or due to high usage, right?
Right.
So I think that's definitely a good point and something to keep into consideration.
So on that question then, Hannah, when you guys are doing your diligence for the rent guarantee underwriting, what types of things do you guys ask for payment history or income? How do you guys verify it?
Yeah, so usually what we'll do is we'll ask for a copy of the tenant report and the tenant's proof of income. In terms of the tenant report, as long as there's no bankruptcies within the past 3 years, that's kind of a major cutoff for us. If there is, we wouldn't be able to approve them. And then we'll take a look at the credit history as well. Like you said, people maybe have gone through a hard time, but we can see that for the past few years, they've been paying their bills on time and they're up to date. And even if they have a lower credit score that's maybe in the 500s, for example, we still can potentially approve them as long as we take a look at those factors and can confirm that they're paid as agreed and up to date on their current credit lines.
Awesome. Love it. Cool. Okay. As we're going through here, again, this is that online record search I was talking about earlier. If there's articles in the news of an arrest, this is where they'll get presented here in the report. So in this case, you see someone's got charged with some drug and other related criminal offenses. Okay, what else? More of a record, not a record scan, more of online kind of searches. There's a lot of these, what would you call them? Online, more global databases. If there's people on, I want to say the word FBI is one of this, but similar types of databases. This is kind of what we're checking here. Again, just because I know we don't have every possible database on there, it's a nice to have if you get a hit. But if it comes back green in this case, doesn't mean there's not something out there. Okay, let's keep going here. So yeah, here's a credit score. And I did see a question come up, what is a good credit score? And that's a bit of a challenge. I would have said prior to COVID and the recession, not the recession, the inflation that we've been going through, you would probably have benchmarked that around that 650 mark. But what we are seeing right now with a lot of the numbers and some of the trends in the industry, tenants typically have a lower credit score than your average Canadian. So folks that are renting, because they generally have less assets, generally speaking. I mean, there's definitely, of course, there's exceptions to this, but we're seeing that they typically are around that 40 to 60 points less than the Canadian average. So again, this is why credit score is a great kind of quick check to as you're scanning through it, but you really want to dive past the credit score, and we'll talk about that right now. So yeah, so here, so in this section here, we've got revolving credit. This is a summary section of all the different types of credit products this person has. So whether it be cell phones, credit cards, car loans, whatever it might be, you're going to see it summarized here. Student loans as well. And something that we've gone through and made it a bit easier. Where is it? Yes, right here. So late payments. So we've got these buckets. I'll quickly go over this. This is pretty important. There's these buckets called 30, 60, and 90 day plus late buckets. And what it means is if someone's let a credit card payment bill, let's say the credit card is due in the first of the month, and they don't pay it within the first 30 days, then they are late, and you'll get a tally here. And the same thing, if they let a bill go due past 31 days to 59 or 60, that 60-day bucket, then you'll get a tally there. And if they've let bills go due without any kind of payment or communication with the business past 3 months, then they'll get a tally in the 90+ day bucket. We've actually, again, on our new report, pretty excited about, we've redone the report where it makes it a little bit easier for you guys to read. Keep in mind, though, this is a summary section, and we can get down into the actual details. So this is pretty cool. So there's this trade line balances. You can see where they're at with some of the loans. Is it a brand new car loan? Are they almost paid off? Is it in good standing? So there's these codes here called R codes. The federal government of Canada actually designates what these mean. There's a link that the federal website has that explains how to read these things and what status they are. But quickly, you can see right here, is anything's past due 0? That's a good indicator. Everything's been paid on time. And this is an example of something that hasn't been paid properly, which is again a red flag. And I guess another thing to keep in mind too is the type of product you're looking at. If you're seeing everything across the board a little bit late, or you're seeing perhaps they haven't paid a cell phone bill, but maybe they've got a larger car payment or mortgage payment because if they used to be a homeowner, they paid that on time. That's a better indicator than paying their bills too. And if you're kind of on the questionable, like say you've got a tenant, they've checked most of your boxes, but you're having a little bit of trouble with their credit score, I would go beyond and ask them for proof of payment on their rental history. Ask for, because most people nowadays pay with e-transfer. Everyone gets an e-transfer confirmation when that payment was done. ask for them to forward the last 6 months of payment history. You'll learn a couple things from seeing those emails. One, you'll see when they paid that rent, if it's paid on time. Two, you'll see typically the name of who that payment's going to. So it should cross-reference and check off on your previous rental history, the name provided there. And so you're in a position to get more information, again, to do that really second degree or second level of cross-referencing information to find and verify truth. Okay, inquiries. I know, Hannah, we were talking about this off air. One of the most common questions we get is, what's the difference between a hard check and a soft check, and what does single key do? Hannah, I'll let you take that one away.
Yeah, for sure. So in terms of our single key reports, it's a bit of a gray area in terms of whether it's a soft check or a hard check. It's a little bit different than if someone was applying for, say, a car loan or a line of credit, where it's a definite hard check on the person's credit. Because ours is a check as opposed to a credit application, it can impact the person's score by a few points, if any. But then typically it'll go back up next billing cycle.
Yeah, for sure. And just to kind of add some context, I'll add on to what Hannah said as well. The hard and soft check, we do it, like there is an inquiry. They'll see single key did a check on the tenant's credit score. They'll come up in their inquiry section. But because we don't have a dollar amount tied to our check, there's no weighting to it. So a hard check is definitely more derived from if someone's done an inquiry for, say, a $10,000 loan, or maybe a car loan. That has much more higher impact than our check, where it comes in the same fashion, but we don't have any dollar amount associated with the check. There's no value really weighted to it. So it's this kind of weird area where it does, yes, physically show up on the credit report, but because we don't have a dollar value tied to it, the impact is very minimal, if any. Okay, so bankruptcies here, again, all good information to kind of dig into. And when you're doing your screen process, I always tell the tenant in the pre-screen or at the view, I'm like, I don't need to see a perfect credit score, but I do need to see honesty. And if there's something that's happened, please let me know. So if someone tell me they've been through a bankruptcy and they tell me up front, and then we decide to go through and do a full application, I see it show up on the report here, that's actually not a bad thing, because they've been honest with me straightforward. And if they still have a recent track record over the last year or so, or last 6 months of paying some of the critical bills on time, then you know they value paying that rent, and then you might have a really good loyal tenant for a longer period of time. I know we've got people across the country, and each province has a bit of a different take. And that quickly, what I mean by that is, in Alberta, because we have the ability to raise rent once every 365 days, we want long-term tenants because we can keep market parity with rent. We want someone to stay there. It spends less effort and time on our behalf of having to screen and onboard a brand new tenant on every turnover, where, say, in Ontario and BC, you folks are locked into, there's really no such thing as a fixed term lease. It rolls into a month after. So having that selecting that right tenant that is really easy to work with, and they're appreciative of being selected by you, will really bode well for that long-term relationship that you're going to have. Okay, so what else here we got here? Best of it, again, more information, different kind of checks. Okay, this is really cool. So when you guys go and create your single key account, you have the options in your settings to turn on what fields you want mandatory. If you're in a hot market and you're getting inundated with lots of inquiries, you should be asking for as much information as possible. You have that leverage right now because you're in a demand-driven market. And what I mean by that, you can turn on proof of employment and payment. So in this case, this individual has had to upload a pay stub. It could be a letter of employment. You could also make it mandatory to capture government-issued ID, photo ID. So down, if we go past it here, we see this person's uploaded a picture of their driver's license. This is really important because you want to collect as much information up front to really build a solid foundation to start the tenancy off in a good foot. And you're in a position, I guess really the saying is, plan for the worst, hope for the best. So hopefully you found the right tenant, they're easy to work with. You don't really need to ever leverage any of this information, but if you happen to get a midnight move and they go MIA, you've got this information to go after them and build a track them down for rent arrears or whatever it might be. And we also allow them to turn on collecting a picture of the pet. Now, so this is today's report. I'll quickly spin over Oh, we're already at the top of the hour here. Shoot, too much talking. So let's go into the questions. We got people waiting for that. And then if there's time after and people want, we can show our new report as well and show some of the changes that we've put into place. So,
Sure.
okay, perfect. Our first question here. Eric says, how thorough or precise is the background and social media check? What is the accuracy rate? I don't have that number off the top of my head, Eric, but again, I would approach it as it's a bonus to have. There's a ton of databases out there, and there's a lot of databases that aren't available online or don't provide access with a plugin called an API, which is how we would automate pulling that information into the report. So it's more of a, it should be complementary or supplementary to what you're already doing in your own due diligence process. Okay. Do you have any specific red flags or tips when using a report to screen a guarantor? Yeah, great question. So, and Hannah, I'm curious to hear your take on this as well. What people currently do, and the best practice is two things. One is any person over the age of majority or is an adult that's of legal age in your province should be on your lease. And the reason for that is if things go south, you've got more bank accounts to chase for rent arrears, damages, whatever it might be. So you should have everyone on there. And everyone that's going to go on your lease should have a credit check done on them. So we recommend doing that because then you have a really full picture of who's who. You can also use your report to screen co-signer or guarantor. So I've done it personally where I've had a student to move into one of my rentals. I didn't have a lot of information, or the credit score wasn't very strong just because it was just not a lot of information part of the report. I've had a parent go through, I've screened the parent just as if they're a tenant, and then they go and sign the lease. The only difference is they don't move into the property. But everything else from a legal standpoint, when you manage your tenancy, is the same. And it gives you that peace of mind that in case something goes wrong, one, you got somebody to call, and then two, you got someone to go after if there is in fact debts or rent arrears or damages.
Yeah. And to add on to what you're saying, Mac, usually for guarantors, when I look at it in addition to the primary applicants, you want to take into consideration that the guarantor would be responsible for their own expenses along with that of the tenant if the tenant ever does end up defaulting. So you want to make sure that they would have enough income to cover their own mortgage or their other debt obligations, and then that of the tenant as well.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Good tip.
So Mackenzie and Hannah, I'll turn to two submitted questions.
Okay.
The first one being, how many applicants screening are reasonable to have for one property at one time?
Okay, so I think, so this is a question that was submitted ahead of time. I think this is someone shortlisting tenants to run through the single queue process. At the end of the day, the way you guys can minimize risk is having a large pool of potential tenants and applications to pick from. And you want to have choice. So this is more of a personal choice on how many people you want to screen to before you've picked someone for your next vacancy. I would personally say I'd like to have 3 strong candidates, whether one's a family of 2, a single person, whatever it might be. I want to have a choice of 3. That would be my personal rule of thumb. It can totally vary by different people and what everyone's comfort level is.
Sure, makes sense. Let's turn to the next submitted question. So I'm wondering what, if at all, should I make of applicants that had or are still defaulting on their student loans? Is this a serious sign of problems?
Well, I'll expand on this, meaning if they're defaulting on large loans of any nature, whether it be just a student loan, a car loan, or mortgage, is really reading between the lines. I kind of highlights before. If you're looking at the payment history and our report, I'll show you up here. I'll put it back on here. Where is it? Here it is. So trade line payments. So for example, this person's had this product for 39 months, 51 months, right? So what 48 months is 4 years. You're getting 4 years of payment history, which is huge. Like this is again the same information that banks use before they finance a mortgage. They look at all this different information. So if you're seeing, I guess what I'm trying to say, if you're seeing perhaps a number of late payments in a short period of time, I would dig further and try to understand, why is this person having trouble at that particular moment? Is that due to, again, one of those life events where it's a divorce, job loss, or are you seeing late payments across the board, like a checkerboard pattern? The latter, where it's just across the board and there's no real rhyme or reason or pattern, is probably someone who is a bad steward of their financial habits, and that'd be a red flag. That would be something I'd be wary of. Again, if someone's got a justification or a reason they can explain to it why that's happened and it's outside their control, you have an opportunity to secure a really good tenant that's grateful and still pick a quality tenant as well. So I guess back to that question, it depends on how the late payments are, and again on what products as well.
Great. Thank you so much for that insight. Let's go back to the live questions.
Okay. We got lots by the look of it too, which is sweet. Okay. Is automated rent collection aligned with the Ontario laws and provisions? In other words, can it be enforced legally, or the tenant has a choice to opt out later? It definitely is compliant across the country. It's pre-authorized debit. So the way our rent collection works is the same thing as you'd pay a bill out of your checking account, perhaps a utility bill. It's really good for automating if you've got forgetful tenants, or I've had some tenants just personally request this, saying, hey, can you set this up so I don't have to worry about it? Which is great. Do they have the choice to opt out? I would totally expect so. I mean, it'd be the same thing if you've signed up for paying your utility bill out of your checking account. You have the legal right to opt out as well.
Mm-hmm. I get this question a lot too on the calls I do, and people ask, what if they do opt out and then 1 month the rent isn't collected? They still owe you the rent via some other means, right? So at that point, if they don't pay the rent via an e-transfer or check or a different way, then they'd still be on the hook for that rent amount.
Yeah. It's a complementary tool to your lease. Your lease is that legal binding contract between you and the tenant as the other party, and this is just one of the ways to streamline some of the obligations of that lease. Ooh, long one. Okay. For background checks in the single key report, do you check the LTB reports provided from various sources like Canley? Open Room is great for doing due diligence. Those LTB decisions, Ontario, that might not publicly be reported in Canley or published yet or made public. What sources do you include in your background checks for accuracy? So yeah, great question. No, we don't have the ability to pull directly from LTB, similar to the same thing here in Alberta. Open Room, for the people that don't know about, certainly worth checking, it's a crowdsourced platform where people and landlords can upload judgments or results to it. They just opened it Canada-wide earlier this year. I think it was in the summer when they did it. One thing to note, though, as I was looking through it, is sometimes they can upload, what's the right word for it? I want to make sure I explain this correctly. They can upload a result that hasn't been finalized yet. So it's definitely worth checking and seeing if there's anything about it and using it for due diligence. Canley's really good as well. From my understanding, the way Canley operates is it's a public database of court records across Canada, across all the different criminal codes and jurisdictions, not just RTUS or RTA, which is the Residential Tenancy Act in your province. It's across a different number of different pieces of legislation, but they generally just upload cases that set precedents. So it's basically allowing someone to go in and seeing how decisions have been made on a very specific criteria, and it might give you the informed decision how your case will be looked at if you're to go and apply for a case in your province, or sorry, a hearing. Yeah. Is there any way to receive a household score or income, or do we have to do it for each individual? Okay, yeah. So I'm glad you brought this up. This is a good question, Hunter. So today, the way our current report operates, our rent to income ratio is based on an individual and a single application. So for example, if you got a couple applying on a property, and let's say the rent is $2,000 a month, and what you need to understand from the applicants before you punch in and send off the application is, if the one tenant says, tenant A says they're paying $1,200 and tenant B is paying $800, that's the rents you want to put in to generate an accurate rent to income metric or ratio. Because if you put in 2,000, individually for each tenant, then you're basically looking at the tenant trying to serve the 2,000 by themselves and not taking the household income into consideration. Our new report coming out here pretty soon allows us to link applications together and give you a true household metric. So we actually give you a couple things. We give you a individual income metric, and we give you a holistic household income rent to income ratio as well. So you really can get a far more accurate picture of the financial ability of that household to rent your property. Okay, awesome. What about Rita asked, what about screening retirees who have private pension income or CPP? A great question. I have a take, but I want to see what Hannah says first. What do you think, Hannah, on this one?
Yeah, usually if someone's retired, like you're still going to be able to pull their credit history there. Typically, I would also ask for, instead of pay stubs, they could provide proof of the pension income they receive and their Canadian pension plan as well. And sometimes this type of income is more reliable than just a pay stub too, because you can see that they're getting that every month for the entire time that they'll be living at the property. But yeah, what do you think, Mac?
Yeah, similar. It is you want to get some proof of what they're receiving on a monthly basis. All these different programs have statements that come out with them showing how much has been withdrawn or sent over. And those are the numbers you definitely want to be verifying. And to kind of pivot on that fact, another question that comes up often is, how do I vet someone who's self-employed? A similar take, depending on the size of the company and how they're operating, you'd want to be looking at an NOA, which is a notice of assessment from the CRA. And it's different from a T1. So a T1 is what I go and send into CRA for CRA to make a decision on what I owe for rent. The NOA is on the back half of that process, where CRA has made a decision. They've looked at your entire tax return and says Mackenzie owes X amount. He's made this much money. Here's his final tax bill for the year. That's the CRA's judgment or analysis of your tax return. And that's what you want to look at, because it's actually quite easy to go in on the tax softwares and make a bunch of different tax returns, and you can fudge the numbers because it's just the start of the process where the information is punched in by the tenant or the person filing the tax return. Are landlords able to contact RTDRS to see if a potential tenant has an order, etc.? Yes, or orders, etc. So if this is for Alberta, and absolutely yes. Quickly, you can go through, go down to any of the provincial courts and do a record search. It's manual process, which means it doesn't take a lot. You have to physically go in. I think that the cost is about $10, $10 or $15 a check. There actually is now an online form to search RTGRS, but from the folks I know have done it and looked at doing it, it's also manual. So you send in the request in, and then typically within 5 to 7 business days, you'll get a result, which tells me someone at Service Alberta is going through their records and physically pulling that and then scanning it and then sending it back to you. So definitely, if you've got the time and you can do it in the market, do that additional level of check. There's nothing wrong with that. The challenging part is if you're trying to secure good tenants, and good tenants, whether it's a weak market or a strong market, you want to kind of move quickly to secure them. You may not always have time to be able to take that long before they find a place somewhere else. Okay, May says, could you please give some suggestions on how to tell the prospective tenant that if they failed screening because of the credit check? Okay, so this is how do you handle rejections? There's a few different takes on this. My personal take is just be general. Don't provide specifics. Say, thank you very much. At this time, I've selected another applicant. I wish you all the best. If you get into reasons why you're not comfortable with a person, you're opening yourself up to liability, possible lawsuits, and at the end of the day, you have the legal right to pick and choose who you want to rent to. But there's definitely protected grounds with our Human Rights Act. Again, age, marital status, sex, religion. I'm sure everyone's aware of this going through their HR training these days. You don't want to be talking about any of that stuff. You just got to be to the point, say, you know what, I've selected another candidate. It's better, and I wish you all the best. And just keep it short and clean like that. Is the criminal scan just from searching news articles? Fair question. So it's a third-party plugin that we operate with. I'm still digging to get more clarity on it. They say they have access to over 200,000 databases. I don't know exactly which they are, which comes back to saying, I'm telling you guys, it's great if you get a hit, dig further into it. I definitely know they do online Google searches of like RCMP press releases if there's been a charge or whatever conviction, or arrest for a certain type of crime. But it's best just to still do your own due diligence. I've personally rented my own basement suite out. I mean, that's how I got into my first house, kind of called house hacking these days, or whatever it might be. I've gone a step further. You can run a police check down at your local police station as well. It does take a few extra steps, and there's some more paperwork involved. But if it's a property that you live in as well, and that you live upstairs and you rent out your basement suite, it's certainly worth it for peace of mind. Okay, rent payment processing takes 3 to 5 days. Is there plans to cut shorter to 1 to 3 days? Oh, okay, this is with our rent collection product. Good question. Hannah, do you want to talk on this? Because I know we made some changes with who our payment rails provider was.
Yeah, for sure. Right now, because it's a pre-authorized debit, typically for any pre-authorized debit within Canada, it generally takes anywhere between 1 to 5 business days. I know we are trying to cut down the processing time, but usually it will still take around 3 business days for that transaction to reflect into your account. That being said, we've actually also updated our platform to reflect an approximate date of when you should expect that payment. So when you log into your single key account, you can go to your rent collections and you'll see, based on when we've collected the rent, when you should see it arriving in your account as well.
Yeah, and unfortunately in Canada, our banking infrastructure, because we're dominated by 5 major banks, or those big banks, there's unfortunately a lack of will and motivation to overhaul our system. I think the world standard that a lot of the countries are on, and we're not, which we're actually unfortunately behind the 8 ball on. I think is it Swift, Hannah? Is that the right name for it? There's a standard, but essentially they put in place, they allow basically near real time or real time payment processing, where a payment gets processed in a matter of seconds, not hours or days. Which unfortunately we don't have that here in Canada, which
Right.
it's unfortunate for us.
Yeah.
Okay, next question. Okay, when I use the Equifax consumer report directly, there are late payments of 30, 60, 90. The Equifax report will also show you the month and year in which the person was late, so you can tell if it's recent or not. Can SingleKey provide this level of detail, as it's one of the reasons we don't use SingleKey very often? Eric, I'm so happy you asked this question. So on our new report, it's actually going to be a dual bureau report, meaning that you can pull both Equifax and TransUnion. The TransUnion API that we've gotten access to shows exactly that, and it's a really clean, easy to read interface. It shows every monthly payment broken down with either a green check mark or a red X, and I think it shows you. I'm not sure if it's a complete history or if it's just the last rolling 24 months or 2 years, but you'll have that visibility that you're asking for. So something we're pretty excited for. The way that our API work today with our provider, we don't get what you're asking for, which I totally understand, but that's coming. Okay, Christian. As a photographer myself, I have a question. When asking for previous rental payment history, and when they send an e-transfer proof with Photoshop, totally. Yeah. So it's quite easy to make a fake email screenshot. Is there a way you can double check if those e-transfers are legit or not Photoshop? Yeah. So always shy away from anything that's a screenshot. This is credit scores. This is any critical piece of documentation that tenant's providing you, because as Christian said, it's so easy today to doctor or change the information with Photoshop or a similar program. So when they're sending you the email transfers, it should be an email forwarded to you. So if you're asking for the last 6 months or 12 months, you should get 6 individual email transfer confirmations sent to your inbox, because then you see all of that metadata, which is the how the emails was sent. So I don't want to get too technical, but you can see the email servers, the times they were sent, who they were sent to. You should be able to pull that information out. Depending how it gets forwarded, sometimes they pull something out. But if you get the emails forwarded to yourself and it's a legit email, it's far more credible to go through and look at than taking a screenshot. And again, that goes across the board with all of your important documentation. Now, sometimes you might not have a source, like if it's a letter of employment or something like that, that's going to come straight from the individual. But that comes back to doing your due diligence and doing your background or your employer checks. You should be able to go through and talk to the right person at the company and fact check the numbers. Eddie, is there an unwillingness to submit for a credit check for a potential problem for denial of rental? Okay, so I'm gonna assume you're asking if a tenant is telling me they don't want to do a credit check. It was more common 10 years ago, this because the practice wasn't very common to do credit checks on tenants. I still see some old school landlords that don't do it, but to each their own. My personal take on it is I want as much information as possible. Again, you're giving complete control of an expensive asset to a stranger you've just met in a very short period of time. So you got to build a fact check and make sure everything's in line. If a tenant's telling you they don't want to fill it, so it's very common now to do credit checks. If a tenant's balking at that, that would be an indicator they might have something to hide, or maybe they don't. They're just not comfortable with it. But you don't change your due diligence process for someone else. You stick to what you do, and I would just move on. There's lots of tenants out there.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like there's just so much competition right now in the rental market anyway. If someone doesn't want to provide a credit check, which is a pretty basic piece of information in an application, you can move on to the next.
Mate, would you recommend single key screening tool for the first or the last step in deciding whether a prospective tenant is a good fit? Okay, good question. I actually got interviewed by CBC News on this exact topic, where there was landlords when we started getting really heated in Alberta that were using a full application before they set up viewings. Just don't do it. It isn't ethical. I mean, and really, I think the easiest way to help feel this through is put yourself in the shoes of the tenant. You're looking for a place to go move into, and someone, before you can even see the place to ensure it's legitimate, they're asking for your SIN number, your driver's license, all this information up front. It's pretty invasive just to set up a viewing. What you should be doing is there's a pre-screen step that happens before, whether you do it over email, text, phone call. If you can, I prefer phone call because you get more nuances in the communication medium. But you should have a set of questions just kind of qualifying before you spend time and set up the viewing. And that's where you would do a bit of the pre-screen step. We actually have a pre-screen tool built into our platform, so you guys can use it for free. All you have to do is go online, create an account with Single Key. There's a pre-screen form, and you can pick and choose what fields are on there. And I think we've even expanded upon that in our new app that's coming out here in the upcoming weeks. And you can embed that link on your rental ads, or you can send that in a text message. I mean, another tip as well, I tell landlords to do is on your phone. We all have note-taking applications. Take your questions, copy and paste in there, and then dump and send them to the tire kickers. Because I get, I'm sure everyone does, is it available? Those kind of pre-filled automatic replies. If you fire all of your 10 questions or whatever it might be for your pre-screen process to them, two things will happen. They'll self-filter out, and then you treat everyone equally in your screening process, so you're not at risk of being viewed as being prejudiced or unfair. And second is the people that do respond, you may have found a really quality applicant of a tire kicker that you would have not otherwise had if you just ignored the check. So quickly to me, it's done up front. There should be a level of pre-screen. When you've qualified and you've done the viewing, and that's at the step where you're getting applications in. And you can choose then off our pre-screen tool as well. You can choose which people to run a full report on. And I know when you select the pre-screen form to the tenant report, I believe it will actually pre-populate all the information the tenants filled out, so they don't have to do a duplicate dump of the same information on the application as well.
Let's just take one more question, and then we'll reach out personally to everyone else who we haven't answered to answer your questions offline.
Yeah, I wanted to share that report, but man, there's just so much. It's I could talk for days. Like there's a lot to this whole process. Okay, how do you vet newcomers to Canada when they don't have job credit history yet? And what do you think about when they offer 1 year rent up front? Yeah, so great questions, Sophia. I know, Hannah, you have a quick take on this. It's tough because you don't have any information. Try collecting something like a work permit. There should be some documentation from our federal government and immigration that has some proof that they're here. So I had a couple new families move into some of my rentals, and they had their Canada physical work permits they brought to the viewing, and I was able to take a picture of it. Plus, I was able to touch and feel it, and I can feel it. It was it was like a legal document. It had all like the same kind of security stuff you find in like dollar bills and things of that nature. We have a rent guarantee product, which I think really suits us quite well. So you could easily take a rent guarantee. And what the rent guarantee is essentially is us as Single Key will co-sign this tenant and we'll guarantee the rent. It comes down to, again, they have to qualify by having a job and some of the other things that I'm sure Hannah can dump into. But this is a great way where for a nominal fee, which is 5% of the monthly rent, and I'm sure most tenants would be happy to pay this. If it means keeping $50,000 in their pocket that they don't have to pay up front, then they can use that money to start their life quicker and get kind of their life back in order when moving to a new country and starting fresh.
Yeah, exactly. And to your point, Mac, usually for newcomers, they don't have the credit history here yet, but quite often they're coming with substantial savings. Some already have offer letters from jobs, or they're transferring from their job in their home country to the branch in Canada. So seeing some sort of proof of that can help us qualify them for the rent guarantee. And then they're not feeling like they have to offer a year up front. They pay the 5% instead. They can use those other funds to set up their life here, invest that, whatever they want to do. But as a landlord, you're still covered in case there ever is an issue. Your rent's going to be covered by us.
Yeah. So I think, Karen, what we can do, I'm seeing some more questions about the new report. We're obviously at that time right now. We've gone almost a full hour. We'll do an email blast, and maybe we can set up a separate webinar to show our new report and kind of how that process looks. I'm super excited for it because I've had a lot of say in how to structure it. It's so much better. And I see Vince. Hey, Vince, good to see you, bud. I recognize you as well. So yeah, we can set that out in a post email follow up. Karen and I will work on that, and we'll set up a separate session if you guys are curious to go through that and how we've automated some of these best practices and tips. What we've done with the new report is now there's more checks involved, and we've made it really easier to read it because the way our current report's structured from our provider, we couldn't really change the formatting, but now we've got direct access to both Equifax and TransUnion. We've been able to mold and shape that data in a lot more easier way to read, so you guys can quickly make those informed decisions.
Perfect. And as we're wrapping up here, let's quickly, Hannah, if you wouldn't mind going through what's next.
Yeah, absolutely. So like Mac's been talking about, we have our new report, which is going to be launching shortly, that we're super excited for. And actually next month, we'll have another webinar as well on our rent guarantee program. So definitely we'll send out that registration link like we did for today, so you can join us then as well. And I know there's been a lot of questions coming in today. So if you did want to book a call with us in the meantime, we'll make sure to send out a Calendly so you can do that. You can book a call this week with us, next week, whenever works for you. And for anyone whose questions we didn't get to today, we'll make sure to reach out individually, like Karen mentioned.
I hope you guys found it really useful. This is my bread and butter. I love anything on the tenant screen side because, again, it's a make you or break you in this rental industry. If you find that right tenant up front, it makes the rest of the tenancy really low stress, easy to manage, get the rental repairs done. Having that wrong person in place is just not even like the mental toll and stress, but then the cost and the lost money and affecting your own personal credit score. It's a quick way to get run out of this industry fast. So that's why it's so important to do the right stuff up front. We'll capture all these questions too, and either we can run another session, or I'm thinking maybe I can do a recording and answer some of these questions. We have a podcast. I can probably release a special episode with some of your guys' questions too, or something similar. So awesome. You guys are all very welcome.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Hannah and Mackenzie. That was a great discussion. And thank you everyone for attending the webinar and submitting such great questions. We'll follow up with an email that includes a link to a recording of the webinar, as well as our contact details. if you have any other questions. Again, on behalf of the Single Key team, thank you so much for attending. I hope you have a wonderful day.